Hello guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to the TechTick YouTube channel. To move away from GPUs a bit, today I'll be checking out the Antec's brand spanking new chassis called by the name of GX1200. Going around the box, you'll come across onto your usual informations, before all a picture of the chassis, its dimensions and technical specifications listed out, some talk about its main features like the pre-installed RGB fans and dedicated light and fan speed controller. That's all well and good, but let's take a closer look at the real deal. Although this is a so-called gaming-oriented chassis, Antec kept it pretty simple and straightforward when it comes to its design. The only thing that's a bit out of the ordinary is this V-shaped grille on the front with protruded edges. Similar style is mirrored to the top, dominated by this mesh grille and looking a lot like some kind of tray for putting stuff onto it. At the backside part of the chassis, you can see some exhaust-like holes, similar to one seen on sports cars, for example, probably having some kind of functionality beside being a cool detail, at least for pulling out the hot air. Moving back to the front, on the top you can see your usual array of buttons and ports, where GX1200 holds two USB 3.0 ports, audio in and audio out jacks, illuminated power on switch, and a dedicated switch for LED control next to it. Going further around the chassis, on the left side panel you can see a big transparent plexiglass window so you can show off your components, while the right side panel is completely plain looking. Going to the back, you will be greeted by the regular cutout layout with I/O back panel, a spot for a 120mm fan, 7 expansion slots with thumb screws, and a standard place for a power supply on the bottom. Below it there's a dust filter which you can easily remove, and since I'm already down there, the chassis comes with 4 pretty high feet which are equipped with a foam-like padding. Before I take a peek inside, just wanted to tell you that beside of the chassis, of course, in the box you'll get your user manuals and quick start guides, while in this plastic bag you'll find your usual bits and parts like screws for the motherboard and fans, zip ties and so on. Opening up the main left side panel, you can see that for the most part we have a pretty standard layout when it comes to newer modern style enclosures. On the bottom you can see a metal cover which completely hides and separates the bottom compartment from the top. Down there on the other side you will find your spot for the power supply, surrounded by a bunch of soft padding, and right next to that we have a small drive bay consisting out of 2 trays, all capable of carrying 3.5-inch or 2.5-inch drives. That bay is probably the reason why we have a honeycomb mesh on the other side, so the hot air can get out. Going back to the other side, you can see your classical motherboard tray supporting anything from mini to standard ATX form factor and surrounded by a couple of cable management holes, but unfortunately without any rubber sealing or also rubber door like pass-throughs. The case supports graphics cards up to 410mm in length, while on the CPU side you can install air coolers up to 160mm in height, which is kinda on the limit, especially when it comes to bigger coolers. On the second right half of the chassis you can see that we have few spots with SSD mounts, and next to that a couple of those pre-installed 120mm RGB fans, but more on them later on. Coming again to the right side panel part of the chassis, first thing that pops in sight is the Antec's so-called magic box. It's used as a controller for the fans and LEDs, for controlling their lighting color and speed, for which you even have 2 dedicated switches. You can hook up to 6 different 4-pin fans and 3 4-pin LEDs. Pretty cool and unique feature, too bad that the fan speed button isn't also on the outside of the chassis. Beside that, back there you will find another spot and a tray for a 2.5-inch drive. Well, there's enough space between the motherboard tray and the right side panel of the chassis, so you'll have plenty of room for doing a proper cable management, especially since there's a lot of tie points around the motherboard tray. Pulling down the front panel is really easy, and behind it you'll reveal the aforementioned 2 Antec's 120mm RGB LED fans with chromed out blades, which are kinda tacky for my taste, to be honest. They don't cover the whole RGB spectrum as they provide only 7 different colors to choose from, together with this stripe on the bottom of the front panel. Unfortunately, there is no software control for it in terms of hooking up a USB connection to the motherboard header, it's just purely hardware based. Beside the solid color, you can choose between effects like blinking, fading and breathing. Also, beside this 2 120mm fan configuration, onto this rail you can fit up to 3 120mm fans on the front, and in terms of water cooling, that will be a 360mm radiator. Pulling the top panel off is also done without any problem, and up there you will reveal an installation spot for two 120mm fans or a 240mm radiator. The only more serious gripe that I have here lays in the fact that overall there's no support for 140mm fans at all, which is a bit odd for a chassis made in 2016, especially since it falls in that mid-range price point of around $70. Plus, I feel like we could get a bit more when it comes to your standard and in this case overlooked features for this amount of money. For example, there's no dust filter for the top or the front panel, just this fixed foam-like padding, although the cables are all nicely black. But it seems like cost-wise everything went in those RGB fans, their lighting and controller. That's it guys for this time from me. Thank you once again for checking out the unboxing and preview of the Antec GX1200 chassis. Feel free to give this video a thumbs up if you like it, it helps me a lot. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions about the product, and of course if you would like to see more content like this you can subscribe to the TechTick YouTube channel, or you can just check out some of my other videos from before.